Have you ever had an idea that you truly believed was right? Maybe you wanted to quit your job and start your own business. Maybe you wanted to leave a long-term relationship that no longer felt right. Maybe you wanted to take a path that nobody around you understood. You had your reasons. You had evidence. You had thought it through carefully. But almost everyone around you disagreed. Your friends told you you were making a mistake. Your family told you to be realistic. And the more you tried to explain yourself, the more resistance you faced. Why does this happen? Why do people often reject new ideas, even when those ideas might improve their lives? And why is standing alone so difficult? This idea is explored in Todd Kashdan's book, The Art of Insubordination. At the center of this discussion is something called the smile fascism. Modern culture is obsessed with positivity. Good vibes only. Stay happy. Don't be negative. But Kashdan argues that this kind of forced positivity can actually do more harm than good. Because emotions like anger, doubt, and frustration are not weaknesses. They're signals. They are often the starting point of change. If you suppress them, you don't become more peaceful. You become less capable of challenging anything at all. To understand rebellion, we first need to understand something uncomfortable about human nature. We are not fully independent thinkers. We are herd animals. For most of human history, belonging to a group meant survival. Being rejected by your tribe didn't just feel bad. It could mean death. So our brains evolved to avoid standing out at almost any cost. That is why conformity is so powerful. One of the most famous experiments in psychology demonstrates this clearly. Psychologist Solomon Asch placed participants in a room with several others who were secretly actors. They were shown simple lines and asked which one matched the correct length. The answer was obvious, but the actors intentionally gave the wrong answer. And something surprising happened. Many participants agreed with the group at least once, even when they clearly knew the group was wrong. Not because they were confused, but because disagreeing felt uncomfortable. This is the power of social pressure, and it still shapes our behavior today. It explains why people stay in jobs they hate, why they stay silent in meetings, why they follow opinions they don't truly believe in. Not because they agree, but because they don't want to stand alone. This creates what is called the minority dilemma. If you're the only one with a different opinion, what should you do? Stay silent to avoid conflict? Or speak up and risk rejection? And if you do speak up, should you be moderate so people accept you? Or extreme so at least you're heard? In today's world, extreme voices often get attention. But attention is not the same as acceptance. So why don't people change their minds when faced with facts? Because the human brain does not prioritize truth first. It prioritizes comfort. There are 4 major psychological barriers to change. The first is familiarity. Our brains trust what feels familiar, even when it is wrong. In one study, researchers presented 2 groups with the exact same university policy. The only difference was how it was described. One group was told it had existed for 100 years. The other group was told it had existed for 10 years. The older policy was judged as more reasonable. Nothing changed except the story. The second barrier is the illusion of tradition. If something is old, we assume it is correct. This is why people often trust traditional remedies without questioning whether they actually work. The third barrier is system justification. We have a natural tendency to defend the system we live in, even when it harms us, because admitting the system is broken forces us to question our past beliefs and decisions. And that is uncomfortable. The fourth barrier is called John Henryism. It comes from a folk story about a man who raced against a machine and won, but died from exhaustion afterward. In psychology, it describes blind persistence. People keep pushing inside broken systems, not because it is smart, but because they believe quitting means failure. So they burn out instead of changing direction. But history shows something important. Being right is not enough. Strategy matters. Take Charles Darwin. Before publishing his theory of evolution, Darwin spent years building credibility. He worked on safe, non-controversial topics. He became respected in the scientific community. Only then did he introduce his revolutionary idea. He didn't just challenge the system. He earned the right to be heard. Now compare this with Ignaz Semmelweis. He discovered that doctors could dramatically reduce deaths by washing their hands. He was completely right, but he presented his findings in a way that attacked other doctors. He made them feel blamed, and as a result, they rejected his work. Not because it was wrong, but because it felt like an attack. This is a crucial lesson. Truth alone is not enough. Delivery matters. But what if you are completely alone? This is where another experiment becomes important. Psychologist Serge Moscovici studied groups shown colored slides. A small minority repeatedly insisted the blue slides were green. Everyone knew they were wrong, but something unexpected happened. The presence of that minority made others more independent in later decisions, even though they did not agree with them. Just witnessing disagreement changed the group's psychology. It broke the illusion that everyone must think the same way. This is the power of a minority of one. You don't need to convince everyone immediately. Your job is not instant agreement. Your job is to plant a seed of doubt, a small crack in certainty. That is enough to start change. But being a minority of one is not easy. So you need support, not a large group, just an emotional support system. 1 or 2 people who understand you, who remind you that you are not crazy for thinking differently. Without that, persistence turns into burnout. And that brings us to an important warning. Persistence is powerful, but blind persistence is dangerous. Trying harder is not always the answer. Sometimes the smartest move is changing direction, or changing strategy, or stepping back before you break yourself. Finally, we can see these ideas in real life. Look at movements like veganism. At first, they were ignored. Then they were laughed at. Then they were resisted. And now they are slowly becoming mainstream. Not because everyone changed at once, but because small groups kept pushing long enough for society to adjust. This is how change actually happens. Not in one moment, but over time, through repetition, through discomfort, through persistence, and through dissent. In the end, the lesson is simple. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You just need the courage to think independently when it matters. Because every major change in history started the same way, with someone willing to stand alone. So the next time you find yourself disagreeing with everyone else, remember this. Being alone does not mean you are wrong. And being in a crowd does not mean they are right. The only question is whether you are thinking for yourself or just following the noise.